Since the reinstatement of capital punishment in 1976, only 2 women have been executed in Alabama, but 5 others are still waiting, locked away on Alabama's death row. Some have exhausted every appeal, left with nothing to do but wait for one thing: their final day. What they share isn't just the sentence, it's the nature of their crimes. Each case is steeped in betrayal. Innocent children, family members, victims who trusted them, who depended on them, and in every story, that trust was shattered in the most unimaginable ways. Welcome to Criminal's Profile. Number 1. Christie Michelle Scott. Christie Michelle Scott was a 30-year-old mother of 2, 6-year-old Mason and 4-year-old Noah, when a fire broke out in the early morning hours, tearing through their home. On the day of the tragedy, Mason was asleep in the boys' bedroom. Christie and Noah were in her room. Her husband, Jeremy, had been away for weeks on work. Around 2:30 a.m., the Scott's neighbor, Jennifer Davidson, was startled awake by her doorbell. When she opened the door, Christie stood there fully dressed, calm. Too calm for someone whose house was burning. Her cell phone was in her pocket and she held Noah in her arms. Then she said something that made Jennifer freeze. Mason was still inside. When firefighters arrived, the flames were too intense. They could barely get past the front door. After extinguishing the fire, they searched again and again, until they finally found Mason's body. Captain Steve Thornton of the Russellville Fire Department testified that the fire originated in the boys' bedroom, near an outlet behind Mason's bed. But that outlet was never recovered. It had disappeared in the fire. Fire marshal officials also discovered a smoke detector had been forcibly removed from the hallway just outside the bedroom. The cause of the fire? Lightning? Faulty wiring? Ruled out. Batteries, chemicals, spontaneous combustion? All dismissed. According to a fire protection consultant, this was no accident. The fire was set, deliberately. 10 days later, investigators interviewed Christie. She claimed she had tried several times to rush into the burning home, but Brian Copeland, Davidson's boyfriend, had held her back. But when Copeland took the stand, he told a very different story. He said she never even tried. Then came the most damning detail of all. Just hours before the fire, Christie purchased a $100,000 life insurance policy on Mason. That brought the total coverage across all her policies to $175,000. Investigators said the motive was clear. Court records revealed even more. Mason had been diagnosed with ADHD, PDD, and ODD. His medications included Abilify, Risperdal, and Vivance. A toxicology report showed high levels of amphetamines and promethazine, 4 times the expected level for a child under treatment. That very day, Christie had gone with Jeremy to a salon for a hair appointment. The stylist testified that she laughed, joked, and never once mentioned Mason. After the fire, her behavior raised more red flags. One witness said Christie told them, "God is punishing me for not wanting to raise Mason." At the funeral, she allegedly said, "Noah's always wanted a baby sister. Maybe he can get one now." And at Mason's graveside, she reportedly asked her husband, "What do you think about having another child now?" The jury heard it all. In 2009, Christie Michelle Scott was found guilty of 3 counts of capital murder: murder of a child under 14, murder during arson, and murder for financial gain. The jury voted 7-5 in favor of life without parole, but the judge overrode them. On August 12, 2009, Christie was sentenced to death. She's appealed the case multiple times, but every effort has failed. The Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the sentence in 2012. The state Supreme Court and even the US Supreme Court refused to overturn it. As of now, Christie Michelle Scott remains on death row at Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. Her case is still cited today as one of the clearest examples of Alabama's now abolished judicial override law, a law that once allowed judges to impose the death penalty even when a jury asked for mercy. Number 2. Patricia Blackmon. On May 29, 1999, a 911 call came in at 8:48 p.m. On the line was Patricia Blackmon. She told dispatchers her child wasn't breathing. She lived in a small mobile home in Dothan, Alabama. When paramedics arrived, they found 28-month-old Dominiqua Bryant unresponsive on the living room floor. She was wearing only a diaper and a pair of socks, soaked in blood. Vomit covered her mouth and chest. They rushed her to Flowers Hospital, but there was nothing doctors could do. She was pronounced dead on arrival. What happened to her wasn't an accident, because an autopsy later revealed that Dominiqua had been beaten, viciously. She had 30 different injuries across her body, a fractured leg, multiple bruises, internal bleeding, and the clearest mark of all, a shoe imprint pressed into her chest. Some of the injuries were fresh, others were healing. That told investigators this wasn't a one-time outburst, it was long-term abuse. Inside the home, detectives found more evidence: a broken pool cue, a child's t-shirt, a pink bedsheet, a quilt, napkins, all stained with Dominiqua's blood. They also seized the sandals Patricia had been wearing that night. Forensics later confirmed the shoe pattern on Dominiqua's chest matched her footwear exactly. Dr. Alfredo Paredes, the medical examiner, said it plainly: the injuries weren't survivable, and they were deliberate. It was a beating that lasted long enough, and was forceful enough, to kill a child. So, Patricia was arrested, though she had no prior criminal record. Neighbors also described her as private, soft-spoken. But behind closed doors, the facts told a different story. She was charged with capital murder. The indictment pointed to Alabama's capital statute, specifically the intentional killing of a child under the age of 14. In April 2002, her trial began. The jury heard every detail: the timeline, the forensics, the history of bruises. Experts explained how Dominiqua's injuries couldn't have come from a fall, couldn't have come from rough play. They came from violence, repeated and sustained. This made the jury return a guilty verdict. When it came time for sentencing, they voted 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. The judge agreed, and Patricia Blackmon was sentenced to die for the murder of her adopted daughter. Her appeals were reviewed by the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals in 2005. The court found no legal errors, and her conviction was upheld. To this day, Patricia Blackmon remains on death row at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. Number 3. Tierra Capri Gobble. Tierra Capri Gobble was just 20 years old when she committed a chilling crime, one that most people would never expect from a mother. Her 4-month-old son, Phoenix Jordan Cody Parrish, died while in her care. But long before Phoenix was born, the red flags were already there. Florida's Department of Children and Families had removed Tierra's 2 older children from her custody. Abuse, neglect. The pattern had already begun. At that time, Phoenix was placed under the guardianship of Tierra's great-uncle Edgar Parrish. The court gave strict orders. Edgar was not allowed to leave the state or allow Tierra any contact with the child, but both rules were broken because Edgar later moved to Alabama. Why Tierra moved in with him? That's when things went from dangerous to deadly. On the day Phoenix died, Tierra told investigators the baby wouldn't stop crying. She admitted to striking his head against the side of the crib, but the autopsy told a much darker story. Phoenix had a fractured skull, 2 broken wrists, broken ribs, bruises across his tiny body, a torn mouth lining, consistent with a bottle being shoved in too forcefully. The injuries weren't just recent, some were healing, some were fresh. They were consistent with prolonged, repeated abuse. Dr. Jonas Salney, the ER physician who treated Phoenix, testified that the baby would have been in tremendous pain from the number and severity of injuries. So the pathologist ruled it a homicide. Not accidental, not explainable, deliberate. Then came the letter. During cross-examination, prosecutors presented a note written by Tierra herself. In her own handwriting, she confessed, "It's my fault that my son died, but I didn't mean for it to happen." Just 13 days before Phoenix's death, the state had begun the legal process to terminate her parental rights permanently. And according to a babysitter named Tori Jordan, Tierra once said, "If she couldn't have her children, no one could." With all these undeniable points, she was arrested and charged with capital murder. The intentional killing of a child under 14, a capital offense under Alabama law. Her trial began in 2005. Jurors listened to expert testimony, reviewed welfare reports, and read her written confession. They heard everything. When it was time to decide, the jury voted 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. The judge upheld their recommendation. Tierra Capri Gobble was sentenced to death for the murder of her son, Phoenix Parrish. Over the years past, her legal team filed appeal after appeal, but the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals found no grounds for reversal. The conviction and sentence were upheld. Today, Tierra remains on death row at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. Number 4. Lisa Graham.
I do.
What do you want to say to him? Just that you love him, right?
Yes. Is there anything else you want to say? No, ma'am.
But you felt what he said was beautiful.
Yes.
He doesn't want to lose you.
No, he don't. He's already lost his sister. I don't want him to
July
lose me
5th,
too.
2007. Stephanie Shea Graham was 20 years old when her body was discovered on the side of a remote road in rural Alabama, shot multiple times and left in plain view. But the truth behind her murder sent shockwaves through the entire community, because the person who arranged it was her own mother, Lisa Leanne Graham. She didn't pull the trigger herself, but she planned it. She waited while someone else carried it out. According to court testimony, Lisa handed a 9mm pistol to a trusted family friend, Kenneth Walton. She asked him to do something no parent should ever imagine, to silence her daughter, permanently. Walton agreed. He lured Shea into his vehicle, telling her he was going to help her leave town. She believed him. She got into the car, unaware she'd just stepped into a death trap. He drove her deep into the woods of Russell County, and there, he shot her, more than once. As instructed, he left her body out in the open, so it would be found quickly. When investigators questioned Walton, he told them everything. He gave up the full plan, the weapon, the motive, and the person behind it all, Lisa Graham. At trial, prosecutors laid it all out. Shea had legal troubles. Her relationship with her mother had been strained for years. Arguments, resentment, tension. Witnesses said Lisa believed Shea was ruining the family's reputation. And in Lisa's mind, the solution wasn't help. It wasn't space. It wasn't love. It was murder. She believed removing Shea would remove the chaos, so she planned it. In 2015, the jury found Lisa Graham guilty of capital murder. They didn't just see her as involved, they saw her as the mastermind. The jury recommended the death penalty, and the judge upheld it. Lisa Leanne Graham was sentenced to death for orchestrating the murder of her own daughter. Her attorneys appealed, claiming she had borderline intellectual functioning and poor decision-making skills. They argued she was manipulated, but the courts didn't agree. In 2020, the US Supreme Court declined to hear her case. Her conviction and death sentence remain intact. As of now, Lisa Graham remains on death row at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women, still waiting to face what the future holds. Number 5. Heather Leavell-Keaton. The deaths of 4-year-old Natalie DeBlaise and her little brother, 3-year-old Chase, shook Alabama to its core. 2 children, 2 different dates, 2 different locations, one horrifying truth. They were murdered, not by strangers, but by the adults who were supposed to protect them. At the center of it all was Heather Leavell-Keaton. She was the live-in girlfriend of John DeBlaise, the children's father. Legally blind and controlling, she quickly took over the household and turned it into a place of fear, starvation, and suffering. Natalie and Chase were no longer treated like children. They were punished, locked in closets, tied to furniture, starved, beaten, silenced. Natalie died first. On March 4th, 2010, she was poisoned with antifreeze. After hours of agony, she passed away. Her body was stuffed into a suitcase and dumped in the woods. Chase died 3 months later. On June 20th, 2010, he too was poisoned and left to die. Then his small body was thrown into the woods near Van Cleve, Mississippi. Neither child had a proper burial. No goodbye, just abandonment. For months, the truth was hidden, until Heather's guilt caught up with her. She was arrested in Kentucky, where she had fled, and eventually confessed. In court, the details were nearly unbearable. Heather had admitted to abusing the children. She claimed John DeBlaze was the one who killed them, but evidence showed she orchestrated the abuse, controlled it. Witnesses said she was jealous of the attention the kids received and saw them as competition. The jury heard how Natalie and Chase lived their final days, alone, terrified, and in pain. In 2015, Heather Leavell-Keaton was convicted of capital murder for Chase's death and reckless manslaughter for Natalie's. She was sentenced to death, becoming the first woman in Mobile County ever to receive that sentence. Her legal team appealed, pointing to procedural issues and her vision impairment. In 2020, she was granted a resentencing hearing, but in 2021, the court reinstated her death sentence. Appeals to the Alabama Supreme Court and even the US Supreme Court failed. As of today, Heather Leavell-Keaton remains on death row at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women.
5 women, 5 lives forever marked by choices that led them to death row. Each story, unthinkable. Each victim, innocent. Each sentence, final. They may never walk free again. And for some, time is already running out. This is not just about justice, it's about the price of betrayal when it comes from within. Thanks for watching. This is Criminals Profile.